Hi there, I'm Delaney. For 10 years, my family laughed at the firm I built from scratch, called it a hobby, a phase. At the last gala, they even erased me from our legacy video. But what they didn't know? I owned the very empire they were standing in. Why would a family mock, erase, and betray one of their own until it was too late? What time are you listening, and where are you watching from? Have you ever felt like your own blood tried to write you out of your story? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your truth. The clinking of champagne flutes and soft laughter filled the ballroom like fog, thin, elegant, and suffocating. I stepped through the grand entrance of Franklin's estate alone, the hem of my navy blue dress whispering against the marble floor. No one rushed to greet me. They didn't need to. My place here had been silently reassigned years ago. Colleen was the first to notice me. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Delaney, you look minimal," she said, her gaze dragging over my off-rack dress and unstyled hair. "Very startup chic." I smiled without showing teeth. "Nice to see you too, Aunt Colleen." Everywhere I turned, conversations shifted the second I got close. Cousins whispering about unicorn valuations like they understood the term, Veronica holding court like she was already queen. I caught Franklin's eye across the room. He lifted his glass toward me, not in greeting but dismissal. His voice echoed from a conversation nearby. "We honor those who stayed loyal to the legacy." It landed like a slap. Legacy. As if I hadn't once bled for it. A younger cousin sauntered over and said, "Hey Delaney, next year maybe you could have a little vendor booth outside. Sell your techie stuff, right?" Laughter from behind. I let it roll over me, the way I had learned to survive storms, still on the outside, boiling within. Then the lights dimmed, the MC's voice cut through the buzz. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate the future of the Haynes family legacy." My stomach turned. I didn't move. "Please join me in congratulating the new official heir to Delcor Industries, Veronica Haynes." Applause erupted like a bomb. I didn't blink. Veronica stood, radiant in emerald silk, teeth gleaming like she knew this moment was always hers. She blew kisses. A proud Franklin stood beside her, kissing her temple like a king passing down the crown. My name was mentioned once. And of course, Delaney Marks, whose unconventional path continues beyond the family's core mission. Unconventional, like a stray dog who chose the alley over the palace. I stood in place, clapping once, twice, and then letting my hands fall. No one noticed. They weren't looking for me. In my mind, I saw a different evening, 8 years ago, at a quiet cafe near Loyola. Franklin had leaned across the table and said, "You're smart, Delaney. But image matters more than blood. You don't project legacy." He had meant it. Back in the present, I excused myself from the cluster around the champagne fountain. My heels clicked against the tile as I slipped into the night air of the estate garden. The chill kissed my arms, but I didn't shiver. Not tonight. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a slim leather folder. Vanguard. Delcor Strategy. Phase 3. My fingers lingered on the embossed letters before I opened it, letting the cool moonlight spill across the documents inside. Numbers, projections, board contacts, and most importantly, timing. I looked back at the house, at the balcony where Veronica stood waving like royalty. "Enjoy your reign," I whispered, folding the leather shut. "It's your last gala on that stage." The ballroom lights dimmed again, and a hush swept across the crowd like a command, a projector whirred to life, casting warm, flickering light onto the velvet-draped wall. The Haynes Legacy, 50 years of leadership, the screen read in gold serif font. My wine glass hovered near my lips, untouched. The first photo was of Franklin in his 20s, beaming beside my grandfather in front of the original Delcor office. Then came the parade. Babies in bassinets, toddlers in tuxedos, graduations, weddings, groundbreakings, galas passed. I searched instinctively for myself, sure my valedictorian speech or the launch of my early prototype would flash across the screen. But nothing came. I leaned in slightly. Maybe they saved me for the end. Maybe it was a mistake. Then the final frame froze. Veronica in the Delcor boardroom, Franklin's hand on her shoulder, the caption reading, "The future." Not even a single still. Not my face. Not my name. There was a murmur behind me, someone older, maybe Aunt Sharon, gasping, "Is Delaney not in it at all?" Veronica turned slightly and met my gaze. She smiled, thin and deliberate, like she'd just pulled off the most elegant kill in the room. I didn't move. I didn't blink. But my fingers curled tighter around the stem of the glass until I feared it might snap. They hadn't just overlooked me, they had erased me. I remembered the exact clip they used to show every year. Me, 19, in cap and gown, arms thrown around Franklin, laughing. I remembered the applause, the way Colleen had dabbed her eyes. I remembered because it used to mean something. They didn't forget. They deleted. The truth hit like a backdraft. I hadn't been written out. I'd been rewritten, and I knew who had the pen. 5 years ago. Gavin invited me to brunch, that whitewashed cafe he always picked when he needed to pretend things were innocent. He ordered for both of us without asking. "Just a formality," he said, sliding a thin document folder across the table. "We're updating the family trust structure. Dad wants everything aligned by generation." I was distracted, scrolling through investor emails. "I trust you," I'd said. "You're the numbers guy." I signed without reading past the title. 3 months later, I discovered it was a waiver. Legal language buried on page 3, stripping me of inheritance claims, voting rights, even the Delcor name in corporate context. A clean cut. I confronted Gavin once briefly. He shrugged. "You said you didn't want to be involved anymore. I was doing you a favor." I didn't fight then, not because I was weak, but because I still believed they'd find a way to include me again, that they'd remember. They remembered. They just didn't care. Back in the ballroom, Gavin stood with a whiskey in hand, laughing with Franklin and Veronica. He tapped his glass against hers like they'd just conquered a continent. As I walked past, his eyes met mine. He smiled. It wasn't smug. It was empty, like nothing about tonight meant anything beyond the applause. "You took what wasn't yours," I thought, "and you'll pay in the currency you worship, power." I left before dessert. Back home, I knelt beside the old mahogany drawer in my study and turned the key. It stuck, then gave with a soft click. Inside, a dusty envelope, my copy of the document Gavin had slipped me, notarized, time-stamped. Underneath it, a folded receipt from his personal assistant. A couriered legal filing, date-stamped 1 week before our brunch. He never intended to ask. It had always been a heist. I laid both papers side by side, stared at them under the lamplight. "This is where your legacy starts to crumble," I whispered. My apartment pulsed with quiet. No TV, no music, only the hum of the refrigerator and the rustle of manila folders opening across my kitchen table like war maps. I hadn't touched these documents in years, but I'd known exactly where they were. Contracts, backups, legal memos. Every piece of paper I once tried to forget had been stored, filed, labeled. I just hadn't had a reason to unleash them. Until now. I powered up the slim black drive marked G. Lincoln. It clicked to life and loaded slowly, almost theatrically. I clicked on the audio file titled brunch_trust.mp4. His voice filtered through my speakers, clear as glass. "It's just housekeeping, Lainey. You know how Dad gets with his legacy stuff. Trust me." That voice, friendly, reassuring, laced with condescension so smooth I hadn't even tasted it back then. 5 years ago, I'd sat across from him in a bright cafe in Lincoln Park, brick walls and overpriced lavender lattes. He'd ordered for both of us, naturally. "No need to drag lawyers into this," he'd said, flashing his polished teeth. "It's family." I remember hesitating, just for a second. I looked down at the pages he slid across to me, formatted like every trust update I'd signed before. I was tired, distracted, hungry maybe, but not blind. That's why beneath the table I tapped the recording button on my phone. My hand shook as I signed, but only briefly. I didn't flinch when Gavin clapped his hand over mine and said, "You're doing the smart thing. Less drama, more clarity." Smart. He said that word like he owned it. But I had already started hedging, because even back then, I knew what he feared most: paper trails and lawyers who didn't answer to him. Back in the present, I reached for a different file, thin, gray, no label on the outside. Inside, Reverend Clause 42. A, my insurance policy. I remembered emailing the draft to a quiet firm in New Jersey, a firm not listed on any Haynes or Delcor database. They inserted one line, buried in Section 8.3. Simple, cold, devastating. All terms null if signatory's equity forfeiture is later proven coerced under fiduciary misrepresentation. Legal speak, but lethal. I printed it again, fresh, crisp, and then carefully, I uploaded the audio clip to a secure drive shared with my lawyer, marked as time sensitive. No words, just the file. The memo came next, a draft letter of disclosure to the SEC citing irregularities in internal ownership structures at Delcor Holdings. Then I scheduled the meeting. Equity consulting entity. They knew me only as Vanguard. The pieces were all moving now. Every slight, every omission, every smirk from Veronica. They weren't fuel anymore. They were tactics. I wasn't trying to prove I belonged. I was proving they'd lose everything by pushing me out. The screen dimmed. A soft buzz on my phone lit up the date. 3 days to board vote, Delcor. I stood, walked to the mirror above the kitchen sink, and looked myself straight in the eye. I wasn't the girl Gavin tricked anymore. "You made me a footnote," I whispered, "but I wrote the last clause." The rooftop lights in Manhattan shimmered like polished lies. I arrived alone, wrapped in black silk, and just late enough to let the center of attention settle. Champagne glasses clinked, and a string quartet draped the night in civility. Then I saw him, Miles, standing beside Veronica, his arm wrapped loosely around her waist, smug and polished as ever. A glint of recognition flickered in his eyes when he saw me. Veronica's voice rose, delicate and pointed. "To taking risks, and knowing when to bet on something real." She raised her glass. "Some people chase dreams until they bleed. I chose differently." The crowd chuckled. My smile didn't move, but inside 1,000 needles. She didn't just know, she weaponized the memory. 7 years ago, Miles had walked into my startup with all the charm of a corporate savior. I was hungry for expansion. He offered mentorship, investor introductions, operational strategy, and I, like a fool clinging to hope, let him in. He attended my board meetings, reviewed our financial decks, then he took those insights and handed them to a rival firm. 2 weeks later, they undercut our valuation in front of the same investors Miles had introduced. My deal evaporated overnight. The day I laid off my team, I didn't cry. I packed alone. A jar of paper clips fell, and I remember crouching to pick them up one by one, thinking, this is how trust ends, in shards and silence. I never told anyone what he did, not even my lawyer. I buried it. But I never forgot. 3 years later, I came across a whisper in a quarterly compliance bulletin. Miles's firm had missed a major disclosure on a merger, technically minor, but legally exposed. I knew the wording. I'd written similar clauses myself, so I forwarded it to a firm in Delaware, a firm I owned through 3 layers of corporate veils. They filed an anonymous complaint to the SEC. Then came the audit, the suspension. His name splashed across financial sites as reckless, irresponsible, under investigation. He never knew where it started. Back in the present, I stepped forward with my glass. "To Veronica," I said smoothly, lifting my flute, "and to second chances. They don't always come around, but when they do, may they be sweeter than the first." She laughed lightly. "You'll find someone eventually, someone not allergic to risk." I tilted my head. "Risk and I go way back, and we're still winning." The applause muffled the tension. but she saw the glint in my eyes, a vibration in my purse. I checked my phone discreetly beneath the table. Miles Hayworth has applied for Delcor M&A, final review pending. My gaze shifted, slow and deliberate. Veronica caught it. Her smile faltered for a second, just long enough. "You sure know how to pick 'em," I murmured, setting the glass down. My phone buzzed before the sun hit the windows. A text from an old colleague. "You're trending." Not in a good way. I slid out of bed, heart already hammering. The screen lit up with the clip. Colleen Brenner, poised and laughing under the bright lights of a national morning show. "Well, let's be honest," she said, grinning. "Delaney's company? It's basically a LinkedIn hobby. Cute branding for women who need something between yoga and divorce." The hosts cracked up. So did the audience. The laughter kept looping. I didn't cry. But my jaw locked so tightly it ached. The woman who used to call me niece-in-law had just turned my entire career into a punchline. By 9, my inbox was bloated. Clients, board members, a PR manager typing damage containment plan into subject lines. One investor wrote, "Just checking in. Should we prepare a distancing statement?" I canceled our team sync, sat in my home office, watching the echo chamber ripple. A junior analyst sent a group chat message. Should we rename the firm to Yoga and Divorce LLC? They thought I wouldn't see it. They were wrong. I closed my laptop, walked to the window, watched a neighbor walk her golden retriever. The air felt heavier than it should. My reflection in the glass looked composed, but inside, I felt the sharp edge of something splinter. Then, an anonymous email landed. No subject, just a file. I clicked. Colleen, in a dressing room, rehearsing. She looked into the mirror, adjusting her earrings. "Let's try that again," she said to someone off camera. "Delaney's firm. You know, that LinkedIn hobby line. It lands better if I smirk right after." The video was time-stamped, studio branded. She hadn't misspoken. She'd scripted it. I watched the clip again, and again, then called my media advisor. "Leak it, quietly, watermarked, let the people do the rest." By mid-afternoon, the clip spread faster than her segment ever had. The public turned. Influencers posted screenshots. One caption read, "You don't get to tear down women who build. Not anymore." I recorded my own response that night. Simple backdrop, no dramatics. "There's a growing trend," I said calmly, "where women who step into power are ridiculed for daring to lead on their terms. They call our ambition a hobby. But I've seen hobbies. Mine moves markets." I ended the video without venom, just presence. By morning, my name was no longer a joke. It was a rallying cry. And then came the final twist. An internal email pinged from my assistant. Forwarded request. Subject, booking inquiry. Colleen Brenner's apology tour pitch. I read it once, twice, then typed my response. Decline, then leak the request. The boardroom smelled of leather and anxiety. Frosted glass walls shimmered in the Manhattan sunlight, but inside, the air was stiff with false confidence. Gavin held the floor, chest puffed as he spun his version of control, half charisma, half illusion. "I think we can all agree the press needs to stay out of this," he said, tapping his Mont Blanc against a folder marked confidential. "Delcor's direction must remain clear, strategic, predictable." Predictable. That word clung to my ears like static. I sat at the end of the table, legs crossed, blazer sharp. Nobody looked at me twice. To them, I was still the footnote, the relic of some old equity deal they thought dissolved in a mistake. Then I cleared my throat. "Before we proceed with the vote," I said, sliding a leather folder forward, "there's a change to the agenda." Heads turned. Gavin's smile held a second too long before twitching. I opened the folder and handed copies to the board. Legal documentation, notarized, time-stamped. Ownership disclosures, corporate structuring, proof of purchase from shell funds they never traced. "I own 51% of Vanguard," I said. "Effective immediately, I resume control as CEO and executive chair." Silence. One of the senior partners blinked. Veronica's coffee cup hit the glass table harder than necessary. Gavin didn't move. That's impossible, he muttered. You signed. Yes, Gavin, I signed, but you should have read further. I pulled out a second document. Section 8.3, in clean serif font. In the event of proven fiduciary misconduct, all residual privileges shall be revoked from the secondary signatory. You misrepresented the trust documents. You filed false equity statements. I have time-stamped audio, certified legal opinion, and a notarized SEC complaint pending confirmation. Gavin's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish caught mid-lie. You can't just... Security is already briefed, I said. You'll be escorted out after this meeting, quietly or not. That's your only choice left. Someone near the end of the table clapped once, then stopped, unsure. It didn't matter. I stood. This board forgot something important, I said, leveling my eyes at each one of them. I helped build this company. I know its bones. While you made me a ghost, I was studying your every flaw. Gavin rose suddenly, voice shrill. You're bluffing. You're not... Not what? I said calmly. Not capable? Not angry enough? Or not as ruthless? Two men in suits waited by the door. Gavin stared at them, then at me. His face cracked, just slightly. Take him, I said. They moved. As the doors closed behind his protest, I finally exhaled. The board said nothing. I didn't need them to. Power didn't ask for permission. It simply arrived. I straightened my blazer, stepped out of the room, and pulled out my phone. One new message, blocked number. You're not done yet. I deleted it. We met in the executive penthouse, behind a door few had ever walked through. The man who waited already knew I was coming. His tie was loose, his posture unassuming, but I knew better. You always knew, I said quietly. He nodded, sliding over a small velvet box. Inside, his original shareholder token, forged decades ago, never reissued. I stayed, he murmured. Long after they erased you. I voted against Gavin 4 times. You never saw it because the minutes were edited. I saw the gaps, I said. I just needed confirmation. For 7 years, he had played the role of a passive advisor while feeding me internal memos, legal changes, even whispered doubts from other board members. He wasn't loyal to me out of sentiment. He hated what they'd become. I didn't believe in you back then, he said, but I believe in what you're building now. I didn't thank him. Loyalty late was still betrayal once, but I didn't turn away either. That night, I drove alone to my father's estate. Franklin greeted me in his usual way. Stiff hug, red wine already breathing in a crystal decanter. The dining room was candlelit, as if we were celebrating something. I waited for him to speak. He didn't disappoint. I always knew you were the smartest one, he said. But anger clouds judgment. My fork paused. You sacrificed me to keep the water still. He looked away. After your first startup failed, the investors panicked. They wanted blood. Someone to blame. If I'd named you successor, Delcor's value would have dropped overnight. So you erased me. I protected the company. You protected your image. There was a pause. He didn't refute it. He couldn't. You were too bruised, he said. Too raw. The press would have torn you apart. I thought maybe you'd build something better on your own. I did, I said. You just weren't watching. He leaned back. Is this why you came back? To prove a point? I reached into my bag and handed him a single envelope. Inside, his formal removal from the Vanguard Legacy Board. Signed, effective immediately, his fingers curled around the edges. You're cutting me out. You taught me to protect what's mine, I said. I'm just doing it better than you ever did. He didn't follow me to the door. In the hallway, the air was colder, thinner. Veronica stood there, arms crossed, leaning against the wall like she'd been waiting all night. So, was it ever about the company? She asked, voice low, or just about us? I looked at her, saw the girl I used to call my sister, the rival they turned her into. the reflection they forced between us. I said nothing. She looked thinner, smaller, like someone who'd been running from a fire and realized it was coming from inside her own house. Veronica stepped into my office without knocking. Her heels didn't click like they used to. Her mascara had given up halfway down her face. I didn't say a word. I didn't offer her a seat. "I lost everything," she said, voice cracking around the edges. "The board won't speak to me. Miles filed for separation. And Colleen? She's been busy." I stayed silent, folding the final draft of a Vanguard acquisition deal and setting it aside. Her voice dropped into a whisper. "Delaney, I know we were awful. I know I was awful, but we were stronger as sisters. We don't have to keep hurting each other." My pulse didn't flinch, but something deep in my chest flickered, like the twitch of a scar too old to bleed, but too fresh to ignore. She stepped forward. "Please, can we rebuild something?" I opened my top drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. No label, no commentary, just metal and consequence. I slid it across the desk, letting it spin to a stop in front of her. She blinked, picked it up. "That's the raw gala footage," I said flatly, unedited. Her breath caught, the memory of her voice at the podium oozing charm while my name was an afterthought, the way she called me a lovely outsider with creative hobbies. Laughter followed her that night like perfume. Now it gagged her. She didn't cry, she couldn't. Her tears had already been spent in rooms that no longer let her in. As she turned to leave, I added, "Memory is long." She paused. "So is exile." She didn't look back. That night, I poured myself a glass of something aged and quiet. Rain tapped on the office windows like it wanted in on the silence. I pulled out a cedar box Franklin once gave me when I was 21 and still believed men like him kept their word. Inside were old cards, dry pens, an ivory pocket watch, and behind a folded book of poetry, an envelope, yellowed at the corners. My name written in cursive. I opened it. A letter, his handwriting, apologizing. He had tried to reach me after Gavin's betrayal, told me he was proud of my grit, that he regretted not shielding me, that I was more Haynes than anyone at that gala. I could have read it 5 years ago, but in the corner, in sharp black ink, "Ignore this. He's just trying to cover his ass." Colleen. Same date, same hour. She'd hidden it. She decided what forgiveness I deserved and what I didn't. I sat for a long time. The letter in one hand, the box of nothing in the other. No rage, no sobbing, just the weight of a timeline that never got its second chance. One tear fell, not for what was done, but for what was stolen before I ever knew it was mine. The sea was never really quiet. Even in Carmel, where waves whispered more than crashed, the hush still pulsed with something alive beneath it. My windows faced the water now, wide, unobstructed. No family portraits, no plaques, just air, salt, and the occasional cry of gulls too proud to beg. I sat with a mug of black coffee, staring at the morning headlines on my tablet. Vanguard's restructuring was complete. My name was listed as CEO again, but this time no parentheses, no asterisks, no qualifiers, just Delaney marks. The walls of the beach house carried sun, but the shadows in my chest hadn't entirely cleared. Power does that. It rearranges the lighting, but doesn't always change what you're standing in. Some nights, I still heard the line. They laughed at my tiny firm. It played in my mind like an old voicemail I never quite deleted. I didn't know why I clung to it. Maybe because it was the last honest thing anyone in that family said to my face. Veronica's plea still echoed too, but not in the way she probably hoped. Her words had faded. What remained was the flash drive I gave her, the raw gala video, and the line I'd offered as farewell. Memory is long. Sometimes I wondered if that made me just like them. The attic creaked. I hadn't been up there since I moved in. The box was still where the movers left it, labeled Family, Misc. I never opened it, not once. Downstairs, the invitation sat on my kitchen island, a women's leadership forum, keynote slot. Your story redefined strategic resilience, the note read. I wasn't sure if that was praise or a warning. I accepted the invite anyway. Weeks later, standing backstage, I watched the room fill with women in sharp blazers and sharper memories. Stories not unlike mine: erasure, betrayal, long games played in silence. I stepped up to the mic. I'm not here to talk about revenge, I said. I'm here to talk about rebuilding when no one's watching, when no one wants you to. They listened. I told them about signing things I shouldn't have, about silence that stretched like smoke, about contracts, yes, but also about forgiveness I never gave and probably never would. They erased me once, I said, voice steady, but I rebuilt in silence. And now, no one gets to narrate my story but me. Later that evening, back in my beach house, the waves sang something I couldn't name. I opened the attic box. Inside, a photo. Me and Veronica in 5th grade, tangled in ribbons at a county fair, laughing with mouths full of cotton candy. Another one. Franklin holding my science trophy upside down, grinning. Colleen's handwriting on the back. Even she gets lucky sometimes. I didn't shred them, didn't toss them in the fire. I put them back and closed the lid. Some echoes weren't meant to be silenced, only acknowledged. Forgiveness isn't silence, it's choosing what echoes. Sometimes the silence we choose says more than all the words we ever shouted. Looking back, I didn't just reclaim a company, I reclaimed my voice, my worth, and my right to exist without apology. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased, know this: your story isn't over until you say it is. Life won't always offer justice, but it always offers a choice. I chose not to let betrayal define me. I chose to rebuild, not out of vengeance, but out of vision. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight for your place at the table? What did that look like for you? Leave a comment below, even if it's just to say where you're tuning in from. If this story moved you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me why it didn't. Either way, I'm listening, and if you want more stories that speak to the heart and soul, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's next.